begin the program in the tradition of the Jews to call us to assembly by the blowing of the shofar. That's Colonel J. Ibsen and his grandson Bennett.
She said, I wanted to. She said,
Thank you both. Before we start our meeting, I have this note from the Jewish Community Federation of Richmond, who we call the Federation. It's important, so I'll read it ahead of time. Never again is now, on October 7th, a day that will forever change Israel and the Jewish people. More than 1,400 were murdered, 2,315 injured, 240 civilians, women, children, elderly, held captive inside Gaza, 3,500 rockets launched. The Federation has opened an emergency fund to support organizations in Israel who are caring for those in need. Thanks to the infrastructure on their annual Federation campaign, they are able to respond immediately and directly. Please consider donating generously to the effort. This is that time. Israel needs us to do more to respond fully. Funds raised are being used by the Federation partners, the Jewish Agency, American Jewish Joint Distribution Committee, Israel Trauma Coalition, and hundreds of other nonprofits for victims of terror and their families. He's going to shelter those who've been displaced, assist with mental health services, and much more. The humanitarian needs continue to grow. You can find a bookmark in your program with a QR code that will take you to the donation page. I only add this to you. I know many of you have dug deep already. You can dig a little deeper, and here's what I suggest. Forgo Hanukkah and Christmas presents this year. Send a note to those loved ones who you normally remember with an Xbox or whatever you're buying for them, and use that money for this purpose instead. Color guard, present colors. Please all join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please remain standing while the bugler sounds taps. Bugler. Please remain standing while we retire the colors. Color guard, retire colors. You may be seated. Greetings to one and all. When I was growing up in Connecticut, we referred to all who sought refuge from the Nazi reign of terror as refugees. I don't like the term survivor because that solicits pity. We want no pity. We want your empathy, your understanding, and your passion to help build a better world. My name is Alex Keisch, and I am a Holocaust refugee. Euphemisms Jews cannot live with. The final solution. From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. Both call for the slaughter of Jews everywhere. But we Jews are merely the canary in the coal mine. You'll be next on the terrorist list, their to-do list. You see, Faulkner said the past is never dead. It's not even past. There are people today who believe the moon landings were faked, the earth is flat, and 85 years after Kristallnacht, there are those who still deny the Holocaust. Now, just 36 days after the torture and murder of babies, the Charles Manson-esque butchering of our people, there are those who deny the sheer wanton behavior of thugs and murderers ever occurred. Many collegians from elite universities the world over joined tens of thousands of protesters, marching and chanting for the death of Jews everywhere. Why is this happening? It's because the past is never dead. It's not even past. But never again does mean never again. To hasten the end of Nazi terrorists, the Brits and Americans led a 3-day bombing mission to Dresden, Germany. Sadly, 25,000 to 30,000 civilians, and most were women and children, died in that firestorm. There were no mass demonstrations the world over to kill the Brits and Americans for doing what was necessary. To hasten the end of Hamas terrorists, the Israeli attacks in Gaza sadly kill many civilians. There are mass demonstrations the world over to kill Jews for what was necessary to do. Jews being the operative word. Some think that Hamas holds 240 hostages. That's wrong. It's not true. They hold 2,240,000 individual people. While Israel uses an iron dome to protect her people, Hamas uses a human dome of 2,240,000 humans, women and children, to protect Hamas thugs and terrorists. Shame, shame on the mushy-headed students and those professors who advocate for the death and destruction of Israel and the Jews. For doing what they're doing to defend themselves, it's because the oldest blood libel, hatred of Jews. Our mission here at the oldest Holocaust memorial site in North America, is to remember our murdered loved ones and to teach the lessons of the Holocaust. Lesson 1, if someone says they're going to kill you, believe them. Elie Wiesel. Lesson 2, appeasement never works with terrorist regimes. Think Neville Chamberlain and the Nazi Germany terrorists. Number 3, you cannot negotiate peace with someone who has come to kill you. Golda Meir. A sabra is a cactus native to the land of Israel. You can see why sabra with a capital S would also refer to the rugged people who are born to the land of our forefathers. Rabbi Sherry Grinsteiner is a sabra. She is ex-IDF. Her husband is a Marine. She has 2 boys in the IDF serving right now. Please help me welcome Congregation Oratid's Rabbi Sherry Grinsteiner, who will lead us in the opening prayer, Richmond's favorite sabra. If you notice, she was also the flag bearer for the Israeli flag.
Yes.
I do want to correct you. My sons are not serving right now, but many of their friends and family members are serving. But my boys are in Jerusalem right now, and like every Israeli are having to run, Israel and Tel Aviv having to run to the bomb shelter every few times a day, having to deal with the atrocities. They've known many people that lost life and or also in Gaza right now, abducted. but I will like to present this prayer and call on Adonai, our God. Adonai, you've heard our voices for thousands of years now. You've heard our marching feet as we walked in the desert. You've heard our joy as we entered the promised land, and through it all, you've been with us. Adonai, you've heard our call in times of despair and in happiness. You've heard our cries as we were forced into the carts leading to hell. And you've seen our tears as we held on to the blue and white flag. And through it all, you've been with us. Even as we heard the broken glass, we were not broken. Even now, as we hear the rockets and still the screeching hate, we are resilient. For we know that through it all, you are with us. Grant us the grace to keep hopeful. Bless us with the strength to keep on living. Help us see the beauty of mankind and teach us how to create light even in the darkest time. From November 9th to October 7th, Am Yisrael Chai, for you are with us. Baruch Ata Adonai, Shomer Israel v'Shomer Habrit. Blessed are you, Adonai, protector of Israel, keeper of the promise.
Thank you, Rabbi. That was very moving. Ladies and gentlemen, there are 462 names inscribed on the wall behind me. Each one is a unique individual and loved by the survivors who remain behind to cherish their memories. Third generation Holocaust survivor, Sarah Ibsen, granddaughter of Colonel J. Ibsen, survivor of the Kovno Ghetto massacre, will share one of these stories behind a name.
Hello everyone. Before I begin today, I would like to say thank you to everyone for being here today. And I would also like to say a special thank you to all of our veterans that are here today. Thank you for your service. I would like to introduce myself. My name is Sarah Ibsen. I am a 5-year welder at Newport News Shipbuilding, and I'm currently a welding instructor at the welding school there. I am Jay Ibsen's granddaughter, and I was asked if I could be the family speaker at this event on the behalf of Emek Shalom. As surprised and caught off guard as I was, I graciously accepted. I prefer to be transparent about it, but I do have a genuine fear of public speaking. But for occasions like this, I do my best to try to step up and push past the fear. So a couple of things. One, if you hear me taking deep breaths or starting to stutter, no, you didn't. And two, we will get through this together. I will do my best today to tell my family's story. Each year we come together for the anniversary of Kristallnacht to not only remember what was the start of the Holocaust, but to remember the martyrs of our religion, the survivors that made it through, and to tell the stories of those that lived through it and their experiences to pass on to future generations in hopes that an atrocity like this will never happen again. Today I'll be telling part of my great-grandparents and my Zadie's story. My Alta Bubby, my great-grandmother, Etta Butramovitz, and my Alta Zadie, my great-grandfather, Israel Ip, also known as Izzy, had lived in Lithuania their whole lives, as well as each of their parents and even their parents before them. My Alta Zadie was a determined and smart and very handsome gentleman, as my Alta Bubby would describe. He was even going to school to practice law. My Alta Bubby was a sales girl, and when she was in school, her dad was also a cobbler. There wasn't much of a dowry to offer if they were to ever marry, and my Alta Zadie's parents didn't approve of their marriage at first. They were all modest, but they wanted my Alta Zadie to be able to move up in life. For a long time, they didn't approve, and after 3 years of dating, my Alta Bubby's mother said it's time to get married. They went off to a rabbi and they got married and had a small intimate wedding with just her parents and some of their friends. Not long after my Zadie was born, and that was June 5th, 1935. After he was born, my Alta Zadie's parents started to see that my Alta Bubby was a very determined wife and very devoted to her family, and they started to accept her into their family also. She would keep a clean house, she would make food for her husband and son and friends when they would come over, and was always looking her best for my Alta Zadie. She always tried her best for him. My Alta Bubby was smiling and marveling every day at the fact that she got to spend the rest of her days with her dream man. It is now 1937, and things were good for the most part. They weren't great, but they weren't terrible either, as my Alta Bubby would say. At this point, the war hadn't fully kicked off, though there were laws that had already started being put in place in Lithuania, as well as other European countries for Jewish people. At this point, my Zadie was now 2 years old, a very emphatic and energetic little one who was a very picky eater. My Alta Bubby would have to bribe him to eat food and would always find creative ways to do so. Some of their friends had came over one evening for a card game, and as my Alta Zadie was about to start telling some stories from work, his friend cuts him off to tell everyone. They started killing Jews in Poland. Poland is directly on the left-hand side bordering Lithuania. At this point, Lithuanian Jews were not allowed to attend public schools, have government jobs. A new law had come out saying that anyone practicing law with less than 10 years of experience wasn't allowed to practice law anymore. As a result, my Alta Zadie lost his job as a lawyer. So from a lawyer to a motorcycle salesman, my Alta Zadie had thought on his toes, and it paid off. My Alta Zadie felt that because he was head of the house and it was his duty to get things figured out and to keep food on the table, that's exactly what he did. Along with selling the bikes, he even did minor repairs and did legal work on the side for Jewish and non-Jewish farmers alike. He knew that everyone was going through a hard time, and he just wanted to help where he could. And it's just the kind of person he was. Business was going well. He expanded into selling other things and even started to travel a bit for work. My Alta Zadie went on a business trip to Belgium, and on the way back, he stayed with some of his family in Berlin. And that's where his mindset changed drastically, and fears became reality. It was November 9th, going into the 10th in 1938, where my Alta Zadie, from a window of his aunt's apartment, firsthand witnessed some of the destruction of Kristallnacht, the night of broken glass. He said he could hear screaming all through the night. Jewish businesses were broken into, homes, schools, synagogues alike. Windows broken, buildings being set on fire, Torahs and books, priceless items set on fire. Thousands of buildings, synagogues, schools, broken into, destroyed. It turns out that over in Paris, France, a young teenage man named Herschel Grisenpan had shot and killed a German diplomat because of his parents' business and home being taken from them and having to forcefully leave Germany for the sole fact that they were Jewish. Hitler wanted retribution, and he got it. Millions of dollars in damage, 96 Jews killed, and after recent studies, it shows that it was now likely in the hundreds, and over 30,000 arrested in a single day. Hitler got his retribution, but even that wasn't enough. Luckily enough, my Alta Zadie's aunt's apartment went untouched, and he was able to make it back to Lithuania to my Alta Bubby and my Alta Zadie. After the return from his trip to Belgium, things were relatively normal for a short while. In 1940, my Zadie's sister Masha was born. But not long after, following the excitement, the Russians came in to restructure things to more of a communist ideal, and due to the restructuring, they took away his motorcycles and his business. Yet again, my Alta Zadie had to think on his toes, and this is when he became the manager for a horse and buggy cartel. In 1941, Germany invaded Lithuania, and this is when things really changed for the family. My Alta Bubby and Alta Zadie picked up my Zadie and Masha as they tried to make an escape in one of the horse and buggies. They tried to head to the Russian border. They were on the road for a day and a half before, in close distance, German paratroopers started to drop down. They came in on motorcycles and trucks. They were outnumbered for certain, and the Germans were much faster, so there was no other option but to turn back. Another day in the horse and buggy, and the time came to decide. Take the main highway back to Kovno, or take the trodden, overran, sandy back road filled with holes on the way back to Slobodka, where the road to Slobodka was less traveled, and my Alta Zadie had guessed the correct road to take. Bodies of people and animals lined the roads. buildings sending piles of smoke up into the air, they tried to keep my Zadie's eyes covered for what lay ahead. Sadly, a part of his family and some of his friends, they had chosen to take the main highway back to Kovno, and they were all killed. My Alta Zadie always seemed to follow his gut, and this time it saved them. July 8th, 1941. Jews were no longer allowed to walk on the roads, only in the ditches, a status less than dogs since they could still be walked in the roadways. They were also required to wear a yellow star patch as an identifier, anything to separate us from the rest of society. Then on July 10th, in 1941, the announcement of the Kovno ghetto forming came out. By August 15th, all of the Jewish people that were left in Kovno were expected to move in. The options for gating in the ghetto were build the gates to your soon-to-be cage or be killed. Not long before the announcement of the ghetto forming, my Zadie's little sister Masha had sadly passed away. She fell ill just after the attempt of the escape from the Germans, and due to lack of medical attention, she had passed. She was just a few months old. August 15th came around, and due to where the ghetto lines were drawn, my Alta Bubby and Alta Zadie's families had to move in together. What was supposed to be a modest house for 5 to 6 people became a house for 16. And even that was better than how some others had it, with rooms that had at least 10 people per room. There was limited electricity, no restrooms, and no running water in the house. The ghetto was separated into 2 sections. There was a small ghetto and a large ghetto, with the bridge connecting the two. The small ghetto housed about 5,000 people, and the larger ghetto housed about 24,000 people, totaling up to almost 30,000 individuals. The work in the ghetto was grueling. 10 to 12 hours a day of manual labor with virtually no breaks. This is not including if there were a few mile walk to get to and from the job detail that given day, and being starved on top of that. Food rations were given out to everyone on a weekly basis, but when divided up, the daily amount that was given was only about the equivalent of less than a single meal. And yet somehow, they were expected to be able to survive and still complete their work duties without fail, all while being slowly starved to death. Even still, my Alta Bubby and Alta Zadie would give a portion of their rations to my Zadie in hopes that he would have enough food to continue growing and to survive. My Alta Bubby, Alta Zadie, and Zadie, they all escaped death numerous times, when both together and separated from each other. When my Alta Zadie's intuition told him about this one job that had been posted for non-manual labor, they were asking for 500 people. He didn't really want to volunteer for it. Something told him that it didn't sound right. For those that had volunteered, some of the most educated men inside of the ghetto, it turns out they were all taken to Fort 4, where they were all shot and killed. From the big selection at Democratic Square, where the 3 words, "I'm a mechanic," when asked his profession, saved their lives. When families were being sent to the left and others to the right, my Alta Zadie never knew why he blurted out those words, but when they were sent to the left, it saved them. Those that were sent to the right, 9,000 Jewish people died that day, more than 1/3 of the ghetto population. That was October 28th, 1941. At this point, my Zadie was just past 6 years old. It wasn't until one day when my Alta Zadie was at a work detail and my Alta Bubby was at home recovering from a near-to-death beating she had just received that things changed even more drastically for their family. 1,000 people were needing to be selected for work in Riga, Latvia. The Jewish police came into their home and demanded that my Alta Bubby's parents bring themselves, their daughter, and their 2 sons to the selection. My Alta Bubby's father refused. When he refused, they were all dragged. My Alta Bubby didn't want to leave their side, so she grabbed my Zadie's hand and pulled him along, and they all went together. At the selection, one of the Jewish ghetto police officers that knew my Alta Zadie had recognized my Alta Bubby and told her, "Go home to your husband." She refused. My Zadie, being the smart child that he was, started to throw a fit, saying that he wanted to go home to see his father, and he would not budge. My Alta Bubby couldn't get him to move. At this point, my Alta Bubby and my Zadie were separated from her family. My Alta Bubby's father and the rest of his family got into one of the trucks, and from a distance, my Alta Bubby and her father had locked eyes for one last time. He gave her a look, almost of approval, telling her with just a glance that someone needs to make it out of this, and gave her one last wave. Within days, rumors had started surfacing, and that those of the Riga selection had actually been drowned in the Baltic Sea. My Alta Bubby and Zadie escaped death, but but she never saw her family again. The rumors were more than just rumors, and somehow she felt responsible for the death of the rest of her family. It was something that she was never able to let go of. There was an incident when my Alta Bubby was caught smuggling bread back into the ghetto. She was beaten almost to death, or when she was working too slow shoveling coal in her work detail and she was beaten in the back of the head with a gun by an SS soldier, or the time when my Alta Zadie had dropped a large piece of steel during one of his working details and was called a saboteur, and the SS soldier for his work detail started shooting at him. My Alta Zadie bolted and ran for its life. Time and time again, they narrowly escaped death. It wasn't until October of 1943, with the liquidation of Vilna, the capital of Lithuania, when there was a kinder action, when all the children under the age of 12 years old were killed. At this point, my great-grandparents hadn't thought about executing an escape plan, but they feared for my Zadie's life every day, and now it was more important than ever that they escape. Family is the most important thing, and in the words of my Alta Bubby, family is what matters most. But what do you have without family, without roots, and without history? Someone had to make it out of this alive. The family history had to keep going, no matter what the cost. It was now November of 1943, and through a secretly exchanging of letters, and thanks to the help of two farmers, Kalaskis and Marchuk, with the help of my Alta Bubby's uncle Itzhak and my Alta Zadie's cousin Leibel Gilman, they were able to make an escape in the middle of the night. This was November 26, 1943. My Zadie was just 8 years old when he had to lay on the ground alone in a field in the middle of the night while waiting for his mother and his father, and he had to be so quiet and not even make a sound, or it could have meant death to himself and to everyone involved. 8 years old. Leibel wrapped the wires tight on the gate after they escaped, and Marchuk carted them away near to where my Alta Bubby's uncle Yitzhak had lived. After a few barn changes and a couple months had went by, they found solid refugee at some kind farmer's house named the Paskauskas, and there was soon to be what my Alta Zadie had dug called the potato hole. This hole was underground room that my Alta Zadie had dug out. It was 12 feet long, 9 feet wide, and 4 feet tall, with a potato tunnel on each side of it that was connected to it. He even almost died in the process of digging it out. If it wasn't for Rexy, the Paskauskas is a German shepherd, and if it wasn't for Stashuk, their son, he may not have survived. This is where my Alta Bubby and Alta Zadie, along with 10 others of extended family members, stayed for the next 7 months. Barely ever seeing sunlight, this is where my Zadie even learned how to count. He learned how to count from the dead lice that were falling off of his body. And the food being scarce and barely surviving off of potatoes and whatever food that the Miss Paskauskas was able to bring without looking suspicious or getting caught. They had actually posted Rexy above the potato hole, so that way when she would bring food out, it would look less suspicious. July 29th, 1944, Liberation Day finally came. The Russians came in guns blazing, fighting off the Germans from Lithuania, but the war wasn't over yet. For the first time in months, my Alta Zadie peeked his head out of the potato hole, and then everyone got out of the potato hole. A couple of weeks went by, and my Alta Zadie returned to Kovno in hopes that he would find the rest of his family that he had to leave behind during the escape. But when he returned, he never found them. All he found was an unimaginable amount of burned bodies and houses of what used to be the ghetto that had been liberated. April 5th, 1945, Hitler committed suicide, and shortly after, on May 8th, 1945, the Germans surrendered the war. At this point, my Alta Bubby, my Alta Zadie, and Zadie started making their way to Poland, and they made it there by Christmas night of December 1945. And then they had to walk for 5 weeks, but they made their way to Munich in West Germany by February of 1946. They then made their way to the United States through contacting my Alta Bubby's Aunt Bessie via letters, who had lived in Richmond, Virginia. Aunt Bessie helped them when they first came here to the States, and my family has resided here in the Richmond area ever since 1947. My family's been residing here for now 76 years, and our family is now currently at 4 generations and going strong. After coming to the States, my Alta Bubby for a little short time was a seamstress, and my Alta Zadie had been working at a Pepsi Cola company, and he was able to save up enough money to start his own service station, where there him and my Alta Bubby had worked. My Alta Bubby was actually one of the first women to pump gas here in the state of Virginia, I come from a very strong line, very strong women, and I'm very proud of that. My Zadie, when he first came here, he had no idea he didn't know any English. He had barely any education because he wasn't able to really go to school. And when he graduated high school, he was almost the top of his class. It was kind of ironic. He went on to serving time in the Army, and he made it to the rank of Lieutenant Colonel. I don't know a lot of people who are able to literally pull themselves out of a pit of hell and to be able to make it to a whole other country where they knew nobody and not even the language, where they could try to build a life for themselves and try to be happy. I am so proud to be a part of this family and to be able to carry such a strong name. My Zadie also was a photographer for Miss America. He became a photographer for NASCAR. They had horses even. My Zadie did everything under the sun that I could imagine. Next thing you're going to say is, well, can he fly? And the answer is yes, he can actually fly. He was in the Civil Air Patrol, where he actually was flying planes, and he even had his own little airport for a little while. And then in his older years, he became the founder of the Virginia Holocaust Museum. This was a very, very, very condensed telling of a much larger family story of survival and perseverance of my family. And although there's so much more to say, there are millions of stories out there that are like this, of others who survived or perished during this horrible time in history. By the end of the Holocaust, the Jewish population of Lithuania was only about 5% of what it was before the Holocaust. My Zadie was only one of 72 children, and my Alta Bubby and Alta Zadie were 2 out of the only 2,000 adults that survived the Kovno Ghetto. To put it into perspective, the number of children that survived was less than the number of classmates that I had here in Virginia when I graduated high school in 2013. There were around 115 people in my class. I'm from a small town, so that speaks a lot for itself. 95% of the Lithuanian Jewish people were killed off, and around 92% of the Jewish population was killed off by Lithuanians themselves, their supposed friends, and their neighbors. Unfortunately, the same can be said in various countries across Europe: Poland, Germany, Czechoslovakia, Austria, Yugoslavia, Bulgaria, the list continues. For a lot of these countries in Europe, only between 5 and 10% of the Jewish population had survived. Some fortunately above the 10% mark, sadly some below the 5% mark. I'm fortunate enough to be a part of the family that survived the atrocity, because if they didn't, I probably wouldn't even exist today, and neither would the rest of my family that was able to exist after the war. Some families were wiped away completely. Some of the most knowledgeable members of the Jewish world in Europe, gone. Jewish texts, gone. Jewish lineage to be passed on, gone. Jewish history and family stories, gone. Almost all of it gone. The Jewish people were systematically murdered all across Europe, and why? For the sole fact that they were Jewish. Poland, Germany, Lithuania, Latvia, Austria, Hungary, to name a few more, but there were so many countries actively and consciously participating. There was genuinely no safe place to go during the war unless it involved hiding, and the potential of you and the persons hiding you could be killed, unless you managed to get hundreds or even thousands of miles away, but that was very unlikely. As easy and as black and white as it would be to say that we can solely place all of the blame of this atrocity on just Hitler and the Nazis themselves, the sad truth is that we can also place the blame on all the individuals in each country that actively and passively participated as well. Seeing something, saying nothing, and turning a blind eye is just as bad as actively participating. Each of these countries had their own versions of laws against Jewish individuals before the war even fully took off. There were even pogroms happening before the war in various countries. The Holocaust was just a culmination of over 2,000 years of anti-Semitism against the Jewish people. Each individual country had a conscious effort and responsibility in how the Jewish people were treated and systematically killed off. By the end of the Holocaust in 1945, the death count was up to 6 million Jewish individuals. If you were to take that number and divide it by the years and the days of the war, that would be 2,740 people that would have died across Europe every single day for 6 years straight. 6.3 million people. That was the population of Virginia here in 1991. You wouldn't be able to see anyone from the mountains to the ocean. Could you imagine being here in the state of Virginia and not being able to see anybody in any given direction? Even in today, in 2023, the worldwide Jewish population has not fully rebounded from that atrocity. It is getting closer to the end of 100 years, and yet here we are still working and coming back from a heinous event that occurred almost a century ago. 16,600,000. That's what the recorded worldwide Jewish population was before the Holocaust. In 2015, our recorded world population was only at 14,100,000 for the Jewish population worldwide. As of 2023, the recorded worldwide Jewish population is finally back up to 16.1 million people. Again, 85 years later, just 500,000 Jewish members short for the population to get back up. Thank you everyone for your time.
Zadie, of course, is Jay when his father had $1 in the till, and they came asking for money for Israel. Of that $1, 50 cents was given to Israel. Esther Windmiller of blessed memory, we have a Never Again award. It's an essay award that's given out every year. And today, Rachel Lauria, second generation survivor and our official Remembrance Service photographer, will introduce this year's essay winner. And those of you who have children or grandchildren who are entering high school or in high school, it's a $500 cash award. And here is Rachel to introduce our winner this year.
Good afternoon, and thank you all for being here. It's my honor tonight to introduce Fiona Seidel. Fiona is 16 years old, and she's an exchange student here from Germany for her sophomore year of high school in Caroline County. She lives in a small farm on Caroline with her host parents and her 2 siblings, and she is excited to be here today to present her essay. Fiona, come on up.
Thank you so much for having me today. Never again, what can we do today to stop anti-Semitism? Even though we have all seen what anti-Semitism can lead to, it is still an overlooked issue in our society. Therefore, it is important to talk about what we can do to prevent anti-Semitism. Recent events in Israel show that history can in fact repeat itself, and that there is still crime motivated by the hatred towards Jews out there. There is no simple solution to stop anti-Semitism, but there are different approaches on how to improve. Everyone is responsible to educate themselves and other people and do their best to prevent anti-Semitism. There's nothing we can change about the past now, but at least we can remember and learn from it. There are people out there who lost their friends or family members to crime connected to anti-Semitism. They deserve to know that their story will be heard and recognized for what it is, an act of cruel discrimination. Teaching about the Holocaust in school is one thing, but also making everyone aware how severe the damage from slurs or anti-Semitic graffiti can be is the other thing, an aspect the school should focus on more. Every person can participate in the fight against anti-Semitism. Reflecting one's own action and doing research is something everyone can do. Ignorance has led to so many bad things in the past. If anyone witnesses an act of anti-Semitism, it is their responsibility to step in or report the action immediately. According to the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum, crimes motivated by anti-Semitism are currently on the rise, which makes this point even more important. Standing up for the people around you who experience anti-Semitism can really make a difference. One way to report acts of anti-Semitism is through the Anti-Defamation League. Another aspect we have to keep in mind is that there are people out there who are fully aware of the severity of their actions. There are people who grew up and were raised to be anti-Semitic. Just ignoring the fact that there are people out there who just hate Jews for no rational reason won't make them go away. Communications with those who hold anti-Semitic beliefs, values and feelings need to be established so that others can have an insight and possibly understand why they harbor such feelings. Only then a plan can be developed to work through those issues, potentially involving education and therapy. Even though there's no direct answer to the question, what can we do to prevent anti-Semitism, this text shows many different approaches on how that can lead to improvement. The key points being education, paying attention, and communication. If someone thinks that there's nothing they can personally do to help, this paper proves them wrong. Because even writing a paper like this can help. It draws attention to a subject that not enough people pay attention to. 3 months ago, I was still in Germany, and I did not expect to be standing here today. So thank you very much to my host family for taking me here and supporting me the whole time. Thank you for my English teacher who even showed up today. And thank all of you for remembering.
Thank you so very much. That was very touching, very beautiful, very poignant, and very timely. She came all the way from Germany to win $500. Your kids only have to walk across the street, for gosh sakes. Get them to enter the contest next year. Thank you. Our keynote speaker is the U.S. Representative for Virginia's 1st Congressional District, the Honorable Rob Joseph Whitman. He earned his Bachelor of Science degree in Virginia Tech in 1981, his Master's degree in Public Health from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill in 1990, and a PhD from VCU in 2002. Whitman worked for 20 years with the Virginia Department of Health before bringing his talents to the political arena. He's been a member of Congress since 2007 and is a member of the House Armed Services Committee and the ranking member of the Subcommittee on Sea Power Projection Forces. My friend and fellow King's Pointer, Admiral Mark Buzz Busby, the recent Maritime Administrator, gave Whitman the additional title of a quick study. Representative Rob Whitman is a staunch supporter of Israel and the Jewish people. Help me welcome the Honorable Rob Quick Study Whitman.
Well, Alex, thank you, and good afternoon. Thank you all so much for taking time out of your busy days to come here for this specific purpose of remembering those that suffered through the Holocaust. We know Kristallnacht was the beginning of the incarceration and murder of Jews in Europe that took place over 7+ years. Those folks that were beaten, interred, and murdered there through the Holocaust were just incredibly enduring in what they represented in the resilience of a population that was just being brutalized. And Sarah, thank you so much. Thanks for sharing your family story. Wasn't that incredible? Let's give Sarah a round of applause. Thank you so much. Really incredible, and just the resiliency and the resolve of your family and what they did to endure through that incredible treachery and brutalism there is just incredible. And by the way, thank you. Thank you for building the best ships in the world. Thank you for making sure that those carrier strike groups that are over there in the Middle East protecting Israel, thank you for doing that. Thank you. It's incredibly important. What great resolve there. Fiona, thank you for your sharing, so we all understand how incredibly important it is for all of us, everyone, whether you're in the Jewish community or not, to make sure that we stand up against anti-Semitism. You know, the things that we see unfolding today, folks, are just unbelievable. The atrocities of October 7th was a sobering event in the history of mankind. And for all of us, it should remind us about what is an undercurrent in certain areas of the world, and for that matter, an undercurrent, unfortunately, that we see here in the United States. As you see things happening today, as you see things unfolded like yesterday in New York City, it just makes all of us say, why and how? How did we get here? How is this rising to this level, this effort that is, it's been said, it's not pro-Palestinian, this is anti-Israel. This is truly the manifestation of anti-Semitism. And it should not in any way, shape, or form be tolerated. Fiona, thank you so much for saying what we need to do, and that is to speak out against it. We absolutely need to do that. But folks, this is a call to action. This is a call to action for all of us. It's not just about supporting Israel. It's making sure Israel has the wherewithal to defend itself against this absolute horrendous act of terrorism that we see there and the continued effort there. And Israel has the right to protect itself. Absolutely. And we want to make sure the United States is supporting that. And we know that you cannot tolerate terrorism. If you capitulate or if you say, well, if we just weaken it, it won't come back, it does. These acts of terrorism need to be addressed directly, and that is those responsible for this, unfortunately, have to leave, period. And when I say leave, this effort has to be destroyed because we've seen in other situations the only way that you stop it is to destroy it, period. And let's call it for what it is. I want to make sure that we all understand it's not just about speaking out against anti-Semitism, but it's making sure, too, that we take action. And I think that action has to start in educating folks across the spectrum, from the youngest to the oldest across our society. Because as I talk to folks today, it's amazing to me how people really don't understand anti-Semitism, or they don't understand the Jewish people. We need to do more so that they understand not just what happened in the Holocaust, but what about our Jewish community? Who are they? What have they done to just do incredible things, not only for the Commonwealth of Virginia, but for the United States of America, and for that matter, for our planet? People have to understand that. Because if they don't, then these biases creep in. And the actions that come with those biases creep in, and all of a sudden we find ourselves where we find ourselves today, which is an absolutely unacceptable place to be. So I want to make sure we continue to support Israel, and we will do that. We will make sure that they have what they need. And let me tell you, folks, it is continuing to be a big issue. We see what is potentially happening with Hezbollah and Iran getting involved. We have to make sure we deter that, because if it gets to that particular point, it can be even worse. But I want to make sure, too, that we do everything we can to make sure that Israel gets to the point where Hamas no longer exists. Period. Pretty simple and straightforward. So all of us today are here to remember. The Emek Shalom Cemetery here is a memorial, as we see behind us, to those that were victims of the Holocaust and the families that were part of that. The bottom line, though, is let's make sure that we continue from today, not only to remember, but to take action. Really, today is a call to action. And I think that we can achieve those things. I think here in the Commonwealth, we should lead on those things. I think that the efforts that take place across the spectrum here to support Israel, I think, are the example that should lead the nation. So, folks, thank you all again. So thanks so much for coming out today, for being part of today's remembrance, but also taking what we have done today and the stories that you've heard and the people that are here as the example of what all of us should do as people that just care about each other, to stand up against anti-Semitism, to take action against anti-Semitism, to support Israel. Because Israel has a right to exist. And I agree, too, with the whole talk about peace. If you have somebody that you want to join in a peace agreement and they will not recognize your right to exist, as Golda Meir said, how can you enter into a peace agreement if that is the foundation upon which others come to you? And I had the opportunity, I've been to Israel a number of times. I even said, I'm going to go to Jericho because I want to sit down with Mahmoud Abbas, and I want to hear from him what the issue is. And we had a pretty frank conversation. In fact, I had to leave the room because of the way they view this particular issue. And the only way that we're going to address this is head on, and to call it for what it is. So, folks, thanks again. Thank you so much. Alex, thank you. Thanks so much for your leadership. It is an honor and a privilege for me to be here with you today. I wish each of you God's continued blessings. May God bless our great Commonwealth of Virginia. May God bless our United States of America. And may God bless Israel.
Those of you who don't understand what the situation is, it's not a land deal at all. Hassan Nasrallah, the head of Hezbollah, they asked him what he thought about Aliyah. That's the right of return of all Jews to return to Israel and become a citizen. He said, I wish they all would come. It would save us the trouble of having to hunt them down all over the world. It's not a land issue. It's the age-old blood libel. We're going to ask the candlelighters to please present themselves. And while you're doing that, singer-songwriter Susan Greenbaum, who is a familiar face and voice to anyone who has lived in the greater Richmond area for more than 15 minutes, inside of her beats the warm and proud Yiddish heart of a warrior against hate. Today, she's going to sing Sag nicht kein Mol. It's the Jewish partisan anthem, which translates to never say that you're walking the last road, with the most telling line, in my humble opinion, being Mir seine do, we are still here. If you will, please.
Sag nicht einmal, als du gehst den letzten Weg. Gott schimmeln bleiende, verstellen bleie Tag. Kommen wird noch unser ausgebänkte Show. Es wird abblickt und unser Tod, wir sind da. Kommen wird noch unser ausgebänkte Show. Es wird abblickt und unser Tod, wir sind da. Von grünen Palmenland wie's weißen Land von Schnee. Wir kommen um mit unser Pein, mit unser Weh. Und wo gefallen sie, so spritzt von unser Blut. Spratzen wettert unser Gwura, unser Mut. Und wo gefallen sie, so spritzt von unser Blut. Spratzen wettert unser Gwura, unser Mut. Es fährt die Morgens und beginnt uns dem Heint. Und der Nächten wird verschwinden mit dem Feind. Na rüber sammeln wird die Sonne in der Kajor. Wie ein Parol soll gehen das Lied von Dor zu Dor. Na rüber sammeln wird die Sonne in der Kajor. Wie ein Parol soll gehen das Lied von Dor zu Dor. Das Lied geschrieben ist mit Blut und nicht mit Blei. Es ist nicht kein Lied von einer Feige auf der Frei. Das Ucht auf zwischen fallen die Gewand. Das Lied gesungen mit Naganes in die Hand. Das Ucht auf zwischen fallen die Gewand. Das Lied gesungen mit Naganes in die Hand. Da sag mich einmal, als du gehst den letzten Weg. Gott's Himmeln eine verstellen bleie Tag. Kommen noch unser geusgewänkte Show. Es wird abblickt an unser Tracht, wir sind da. Kommen wenn noch unser ausgebänkte Show. Es wird abblickt an unser Tracht, wir sind
Wow, all I can say is wow. Thank you so much, Susan. My mother and father were both partisans. They joined 30,000 other Jews who fled from, and hid from, and fought the bastards in the deep forests of Eastern Europe. Today we lit the candles for 6 million and for the 1,400 as well, who were slaughtered just weeks ago. Cantor Skara Beck-Berman will lead us in a very moving tribute. It's a song, that's a prayer called El Mole Rachamim. And Hasidim Judaism tells us that there are 10 levels of prayer. one higher than the other. Eventually, the 10th level is not quite near to God, and the next level is of song. So she's going to bring us to that level with El Mole Rachamim. Sarah.
At this time, I ask all who are able to stand to please rise for our ancient memorial prayer. Il Malay. God, filled with compassion, justice of widows, and parent of orphans, please do not be silent and hold your peace for the blood of Israel that was shed like water. Grant infinite rest on the wings of your sheltering presence among the holy and pure, shining and radiating light like the first light of creation to the souls of the millions of Jews, adults and children, who were murdered, slaughtered, burned, strangled, and buried alive. All of them, holy and pure in your eyes, may they rest in paradise. Therefore, Master of compassion, shelter them in the comfort of your wings forever. May their souls be woven into the tapestry of life eternal, with you as their comfort. May they rest in peace. And let us say, Amen.
Dayan almanod va'avi yetomim Ana techasher ותתנפק לדם ישראל שנשפך כמים המצי מנוחה נכונה על כנפי השכינה במעלות קדושים וטהורים כזוהר הרקיע מאירים ומזהירים לנשמותיהם של רבבות אלפי ישראל אנשים ונשים ילדים וילדות שנהרגו ונשחטו ונשרפו ונחנקו ונקברו חיים כולם קדושים וטהורים בגן עדן תהי מנוחתם לכן בעל הרחמים יסתירם בסתר כנפיו לעולמים וצרור בצרור החיים את נשמתם אדוני הוא נחלתם וינוחו ושלום על משכבם ונאמר and let us say Amen.
Stay right where you are, Sarah. Thank you, Sarah. This was for the 6 millions that were murdered, the 1,400 that were murdered a short while ago, for the thousands that are being offered up for death by Hamas as well. They are the innocents and the victims of the Hamas terror. Cantor Sarah Mac Berman will now lead us in Kaddish for the 6 million and the 1,400.
I invite those of you that are able to remain standing for Kaddish to please do so. Yitkadal v'yitkadash shemei rabbah Be'alma divra chirutei v'yamlich malchutei B'chayechon uvyomechon uv'chayei dechol Beit Yisrael Ba'agala uvizman kariv imru Amen. Yehei shmei rabba mevarach li'alam u'lalmei al-maya Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh v'yithadar v'yit'aleh v'yithalal shemei d'kudesha brichu le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata v'ikush b'chata v'nechemata, v'amiran b'alma v'imru, amen. Yehi shalama rabba min shemaya, v'chayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael, v'imru, amen. Oseh shalom b'mromav, hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael, v'al kol yoshvei tevel, v'imru, amen.
Thank you, Sarah. We have a special guest. You all may be seated. We have a special guest today, driving all the way from her home in the Maryland suburbs, and it is the regional director of the ADL, the Anti-Defamation League. Please help me welcome our very special Meredith Vizel, our special speaker today.
Kind of need to take that deep breath. So, I want to first take a moment to acknowledge the unprecedented attack on Israel. Like you, I have been watching the horrific events unfold since Saturday, October 7th. I share a range of emotions alternating between heartbreak, shock, and downright anger. 5 weeks later, it is still hard to comprehend the brutal massacre of innocent Israeli civilians by Hamas terrorists. So many of us here, including my own family, have loved ones, friends, family, and colleagues in Israel. We pray for the safe return of every hostage, for the safety of all Israelis and civilians in Gaza, and we mourn for those who have been murdered. Our hearts break at the loss of innocent life. At a time when many of us feel helpless and are filled with grief, anger, and even fear, it is incredibly meaningful and important to be here together today. We come together to ensure the world does not forget what happened on November 9th and 10th, 1938, Kristallnacht, when Jews in Germany, Austria, were freely attacked, their businesses and synagogues destroyed. Nearly 100 Jews were murdered, 30,000 sent to concentration camps, and the lack of public outrage while this was happening. 85 years later, we must now also remember what happened in Israel on October 7th, 2023, and what continues today. Over 1,400 people have been killed in Israel, including at least 30 Americans. There are more than 240 innocent hostages being held still by Hamas in Gaza and assumed other places. At least 10 of them are American. Just let that sit in. Today, as we face rising anti-Semitism and despicable justification of Jews worldwide, we must once again pledge to never forget. We cannot be silent. There have been more than 200 empty seats at Shabbat tables across Israel for more than a month. More than 200 beds empty each night. More than 200 children, parents, grandparents, and grandchildren cannot be hugged by their loved ones today. We are fortunate to live in a community where today we have come together to unify us, to ensure that we do not forget, whether it was 85 years ago or 5 weeks ago. There have been heartening demonstrations of support for Israel and the Jewish people from around the world. At the same time, there are too many who are justifying, excusing, and even celebrating Hamas's terrorist actions. Silence in the face of evil is never an option. Like many of you, I have been struggling the past few weeks. There is a constant attempt to break the Jewish spirit and our humanity. I am not only concerned about what's happening in Israel, even as that is vividly at the forefront of our thoughts. I'm worried because I'm not sure we have learned from our past. We have witnessed that attacks on the Jewish state have prompted harassment, vandalism, and violence against Jewish people here at home, in the U.S., and worldwide. My own area where I live in Maryland just had swastikas a few weeks ago chalked near where our kids regularly hang out. We also know that throughout history, when there is a spike in anti-Semitic incidents, there is a spike in many other forms of hate and extremism. In 2022, anti-Semitic incidents once again hit historic levels. And to be quite frank, 2023 appears to be trending even higher. Prior to 5 weeks ago, now add what's happened the past 5 weeks. Holocaust denial is still prevalent, and we are constantly being reminded we have to take our enemies seriously. As a leading anti-hate organization, ADL is at the forefront of combating anti-Semitism and bias, countering extremist violence, battling bigotry wherever and whenever it happens. Our staff, and we have incredible staff across the country, they are monitoring, tracking, responding to incidents, literally working 24/7 to provide support and resources to the greater community. Look, the reality is we know there's no one perfect solution to the threats of anti-Semitism that we're witnessing, and we do need a whole of society approach. We have to remember to speak up for others, and we have to remember we have the power to listen, to learn, and to teach. Thank you about teaching. Even in the face of rising bigotry, we can draw strength from each other, and we can shine a light of hope. When I think back to 85 years ago, I do remember that the Jewish people have faced a lot of struggles throughout history, and there are times we never thought we'd be free. And I know right now where people are, and I know how people are hurting. But we have to remember, we have not just survived, we have thrived. You heard from a third generation, and listen to her story. Listen again to what she talked about, how much it has impacted this community. When we say never forget, we remember that even though anti-Semitism is showing up here at home, we can do something about it. We have to be a part of the solution. Thank you.
I know it's getting cold, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much. Bear with us. We're almost done. Right now, I need Commander Chuck Talley and Post 144 Legionnaires front and center, double time. Semicircle around me, gentlemen. Special presentation that you're going to help us do. Ben Kuttner, President of Emek Shalom. Those of you who've been here the last few years have seen Post 144 and their commander giving us moral and physical support and helping with our security and honor guard.
Long overdue, but we greatly appreciate everything that you guys do for us. Everything you've done the past few years, the color guard, the security. It's amazing, and really appreciate it. And as a token of that appreciation, we have a winged eagle. I'll read what's on here. VFW Post 144, Chuck Talley, Commander. Gratitude from Emek Shalom, oldest Holocaust memorial site in North America.
Seven months before October 7th, 2023, Steven Spielberg said in a late night interview on a TV show, 7 months before October 7th, not since Germany in the 1930s have I witnessed anti-Semitism, no longer lurking, but standing up proud with hands on hips like Hitler and Mussolini, kind of daring us to defy it. I've never experienced anything like this in my entire life. especially in this country. That's Steven Spielberg. But I add the words of Al Jolson to that. I say, Steven, you ain't seen nothing yet. Then October 7th happened. Why is that? Because the past is never dead. It's not even past. Ladies and gentlemen, we conclude our program every year by asking you to observe the Jewish tradition. Grab a stone to put on the wall. It indicates that you are here and that somebody cares about the people who have fallen. Thank you very much for being here in the cold and for honoring all of us who have lost friends and family and the whole deal. Rob Whitman, thank you so very, very much for being here. Meredith, thank you. Everyone.
She was the main attraction last year, and she had to wear the Yiddish. And, I remember that. And she was really nervous about it. But she played the most Tin Can or Saturday Night Live. So here we are. This